Please be seated. It is my pleasure to introduce Kathleen O'Conner to you. She's coming today to speak to us about Abby's House. She's representing them, and please join me in welcoming her.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me on behalf of Abby's House today. Immensely grateful for the welcome I've received, including my session this morning with the Sunday school, and they learned a lot of tidbits, so you missed out if you weren't there. I want to say that it's also an honor not only to be here to provide information to you, but more importantly to be able to worship with you and to make some new friends, as I already have today. I belong to St. Francis Episcopal Church in Holden, and my two daughters attended Holden Christian Academy, and I understand there's quite a few connections here. And in fact, Sue Karen, who just went out to teach, was my daughter's first grade teacher. And my daughter's now 27, so that's how long ago that was. So it's a small world. My brother is Mark O'Connor, and he was the physical education teacher at the high school for many, many years. He's been retired for some time now, but he has fond memories of all the folks in North Brookfield and had a wonderful career here. So lots of connections. Your congregation has also been generous over the years in providing wonderful gifts for the women and children who reside at Abby's House. And we're happy that you have been moved to learn more about Abby's and perhaps how you can assist in the future. First, to introduce myself and why I am here, I've been involved in Abby's House not as a staff member, but I became involved in Abby's House in 1992 when my law firm was retained to work on the acquisition and development of housing for women and children, which went beyond shelter. Over the time, my role evolved into legal counsel, touching on just about everything that came through the doors there. And I came to know the mission and the operation of the organization very well. I retired from my law practice a year ago, so I'm now volunteering in whatever ways are helpful. And when the request for a speaker today came in, the executive director, who is Stephanie Page, would have loved to have come, and she sends her regards and gratitude, but she was unable to be here. So she asked that I come and share what I know and to provide some insight on the mission and to affirm any ongoing partnership in that mission that you might come up with, and to open a dialogue for creative new ways in which you can come to help all of us at Abby's. So the mission of Abby's, which is located, first of all, let me back up. Abby's House is an organization which began as providing shelter for women and their children in Worcester. And its mission has always been the same, with one exception. Its mission is to provide shelter and affordable housing, as well as advocacy and support services to homeless, battered, and low-income women with or without children. The only part of that mission that has changed since 1976 is we added the piece about and affordable housing when it became clear that shelter was not enough. So since its inception in 1976, the words I just read to you have been the mission. Abby's House has been effectively responding to one of the most fundamental of human needs, a safe place to stay, since that first opening in 1976. It was founded by Annette Rafferty to address the serious lack of safe housing for women, and it was one of the first shelters in the United States exclusively for women. Over 13,000 women and their children have been served by Abby's House since that time. Abby's House provides a warm, welcoming, and safe place for women who are homeless due to countless reasons: lack of safe and affordable housing, domestic violence, economic instability, unemployment, lack of family support systems, trauma, aging out of foster care, mental illness, addiction, or that of those close to them. Abby's House annually serves hundreds of women, providing them and their children with 3 basic and critical needs: shelter, housing, and advocacy. Because Abby's House doesn't receive any government funding for our programs, we're able to welcome women from all circumstances, helping each woman who comes through the door meet her individual goals. Our immediate goal at Abby's House is to answer the door, one knock at a time, for women with or without children who are in need of safe and stable housing. Our long-term goal is the key to the ongoing success of the mission, and that goal is to provide a supportive and safe environment in which each woman can rebuild and reclaim her life. We provide women with tangible skills, access to services, and the emotional support she needs in order to actively mitigate those issues which have led to her homelessness and to prevent future homelessness. The advocacy that each person receives lays the foundation for her to make independent choices for herself and to lead a self-directed life filled with dignity and hope. This is an overview of the programs at Abby's, but before I begin to describe them, please note that our shelter, housing, and advocacy programs operate year-round, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. We have an on-call crisis response team to address issues arising during non-traditional office hours. And as I describe them, I would like you to consider that we have 4 buildings now, a small but talented staff, and that our programs are primarily donor-funded and volunteer-intensive. What I talked about in great detail at this morning's meeting before worship was really the history and how we came to acquire all those buildings. And at this point, and I'll probably say this 4 more times, the website is really full of information. So I really commend it to you to look at, and there's even a chronological description of how these buildings were acquired. And the fact that this is a donor-funded organization and volunteer-intensive will come through when I'm describing the programs. First of all, the overnight shelter, which was the first effort on the part of Annette Rafferty and her small cadre of volunteers, mostly women, who decided that this was a critical need. And I described in my morning meeting that Annette Rafferty, who just turned, I think she just turned 86 a few days ago, was a religious sister of St. Joseph, and she was asked to work with a group of multi-denominational clergy way back in the 70s to discuss the urban needs for addressing the homelessness, which was really becoming more intense among women and children. And she studied the situation for, I think, a couple years, and by talking to real people who were homeless and finding out all the needs and all the problems. And she brought that back to her group who had asked her to do this, and she said, we need a shelter. We need a shelter for women that they can be safe. If they need to leave where they are in the middle of the night, we need a place to welcome them. They did not buy her analysis, so she said, well, I'm resigning, and she got a group of friends, and they went off and they started a shelter. And that's where we are today. We've grown to this amazing organization and really had to push Annette to retire, although she's still very, very active in everything. And she knew I was coming today, and she said she's sending her regards also. So the overnight shelter is located in the same house that it started in 1976 at 21-23 Crown Street in Worcester. And it's staffed by a shelter advocate, a shelter house coordinator, and more than 30 volunteers. Remember, someone needs to be there every night, 365 days a year. It has 9 beds, that's all, 9 beds, and it provides overnight shelter to allow a woman to focus with our help on a plan to address her immediate needs. We assist her in finding and securing long-term, stable housing, either at Abby's House supportive housing programs or elsewhere. We help her to access other programs when further stabilization is required, such as transitioning to more permanent housing. The second program that we have is the supportive housing program. First, a little history. After 16 years of operating only the overnight shelter, the women at Abby's House, who were the staff, and small staff is really been a continuous characteristic. But the staff realized that its dream of acquiring and renovating a second building at 19 Crown Street, right next door to the shelter. And this building was beautifully restored and renovated to provide affordable single-room occupancy units to women. As I described this morning, this is not luxury condos. It's clean, beautiful housing. Each woman has her own room and shares a communal living room and kitchen. And it's safe and it's beautiful. In a few years later, Abby's House acquired and developed another building right around the corner, which was really a nightmare of a building to begin with, as was 19 Crown Street. We acquired this building to supply 7 two-bedroom affordable apartments for women and their children. In 2001, Abby's took over the management of a 4th building, and this was the really huge next step. This building is at 52 High Street, And it was at that time occupied by about 55 women. And this was at the request of the Religious Sisters of Mercy, who had operated this for about 90 to 100 years as safe housing for women. Are you feeling the theme here? And the Sisters of Mercy were consolidating their order and leaving Worcester for the most part. And they could not bear the thought of the 55 women who lived there having to seek housing somewhere else, some of whom have been there since they were young women. So they asked, even though it was not, Abby's House is not a religious organization, but the sisters were comfortable enough with the absolute compatibility of the mission of Abby's House to request that they take over this operation. So Abby's House compromised because this was completely daunting. There was no increase in staff, and they went in to manage the property and the needs of the women now at 52 High Street. So they added approximately 55 women to their group. After another 5 years, all seemed to be working well, and I think maybe we acquired a couple more staff members, especially a maintenance man. And the sisters transferred the property to Abby's House. And a few weeks ago, there was a picture on Facebook. Facebook is also, they use every type of social media. And there was a picture of the signing over of the deed. And I was in the picture because I was involved in that. And I was just chatting it up with the director, and everybody else is really serious. But a little side story on that transfer. A woman who lived at Abby's House walked into the office of the director that morning that this was all going to happen. And since it was being transferred for $1, she handed the director $1 and said, "Please buy this building with my money." And so it was a beautiful bringing together of everyone who was involved. So the total number of residents in the supportive housing units in these 3 buildings is 72, making Abby's House Worcester's largest provider of affordable housing specifically designed to meet the needs of women and children. Thus, they are meeting the needs of working women who cannot afford market rate rent, and allowing women who are on fixed income benefits to live safely and comfortably. The third category of services is advocacy for each woman. It is very important, critical to the operation and to helping these women, and they discovered this early on. When they were bringing women in out of dire circumstances, they then needed to get them up the next day and say, okay, what are we going to do? So each woman had an advocate that she would meet with privately and learn. The advocate would learn her story as much as she wanted or could tell, and then think of ways to connect her and learn about and suggest goals that were realistic, that woman could improve her lot in life and to take control. The advocate identifies the realistic goals, whatever tools, whatever referrals she might need. Our focus is on intensive care management, or as we say, advocacy, in order to help the women access wraparound services they need not only to survive, but to thrive. We work with each woman individually in light of her own specific circumstances and needs. To assist the women in this way, we work with more than 75 other social services, government agencies, and departments. We do not want to duplicate services. We effectively create systems of seamless service provision which matches the needs and assists each person in accessing those services. I'll give you an example. A woman in a shelter may have no money, does not know where the transitional assistance office is. Someone will take her there. Someone will give her cab, she will be given cab fare or bus fare and said, this is how you get there. There's help, there's a nudge, but there is also empowerment, making each woman rise up and do what she needs to do to carry on her life. The fourth service is referral services. Abby's responds appropriately to a minimum of 15 to 20 calls and in-person visits from women seeking help each week. We make effective referrals based on relationships and the knowledge of local professionals, nonprofits, and human services providers. Many of the staff are on the phone 2, 3, 4 hours a day, or sitting in an office with someone who will never live at Abby's house, but they are able to provide from their large knowledge base just what that woman needs. The door is always open at Abby's house. The fifth program is our Women's Center. Each and every current and past resident or guest is invited to be involved in the Abby's Women's Center activities, which provides weekly meals, holiday celebrations, a food pantry, financial literary sessions, computer access and training, other education and social activities based on women's interests and volunteer availability. And I've witnessed all sorts of other things. A yoga teacher will come in and teach a yoga class. A hairdresser will come in and give haircuts to all the women. And as I said, the women who may not have lived at Abby's house since 5 years ago or 10 years ago, there's a saying, once you're an Abby's girl, you're always an Abby's girl, and you're always welcome to come back. So it creates a community in their life that they know they will always have a friend. The camaraderie at the center provides that sense of community, and it gives them stability. They know that there's a lunch every Thursday that they can go. There's also a special children's corner, and this is being enhanced by our renovations at 52 High Street, which I'm going to mention more about as we go on. Then we have the Thrift Shop. And I'll tell you that as I was walking in the parking lot today, I think it was Priscilla, handed me a bag of good women's clothes, and they're now in my trunk with the other things that people have handed me. The Thrift Shop is run by staff and many volunteers, and it offers gently used clothing and small household items to women in need. And it's become a wonderful place for all to shop. We provide vouchers to women who reside at Abby's house and to women from over 25 other agencies who work with women in need. All proceeds support the mission of Abby's house. So if there's a woman living in a sober house, or a woman living at the YWCA, or if your church called and said, we have a woman who needs clothing, then she would receive a voucher, so she'd be able to go to the thrift shop and get what she needs. And lastly, we have the Annette Rafferty Survive to Thrive Fund. And this grew out of the realization that, well, this is wonderful. We've got this woman to the point that she wants to get an education, and she needs just a little bit more to buy that laptop that she has, or those used books that she needs to acquire. Or the woman who has gotten to the point where she's all set to move into an apartment, but how is she going to get that first, last, and security? These are the types of things that help in an emergency basis to cover expenses. Suddenly she has dental needs or medical needs that she can't afford those co-pays for some specific thing, or for her child. The fund helps break this cycle of poverty by providing financial support for the educational or vocational training with the goal of financial self-sufficiency. Additional grants may cover the skyrocketing costs of any of these other things that I have mentioned, medical, housing, and so forth. So this is a discrete fund, so if we're thinking of ways that we might want to choose to help, a donation directed to that fund would achieve those needs. When Annette Rafferty began the shelter, along with those women, and I described some of them today in the Sunday school, many of these women I now realize I knew because they were women from my neighborhood when I was growing up or from my church. Many of these women were working and had 5 or 6 children, and yet they would stay overnight at Abby's shelter. They would stop on the way into their job and pick up the sheets, bring them home after supper, wash them, and bring them back to the shelter and make the beds. This is how it all began, with people who wanted to give their love and their compassion. And when Annette and all these other women started the shelter, it was their belief that this was a temporary need. This was a blip. This was something just that they needed to address for a short time, which is probably why they all got into it. They thought, well, okay, this is just for a little while. We have to stabilize this situation and maybe things are going to get better. Instead, the need for safe, affordable housing and help for women has just multiplied enormously. And Abby's House continues to address these needs from a place of compassion and hospitality and justice and patience and love. I think you can see from my description of the history that the programs provided to these women are much like Jesus' parable of the mustard seed, which is something that I'd like to read from Mark's version. And he said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable shall we use for it? It is like a grain of mustard seed, which when sown upon the ground is the smallest of all the seeds on earth. Yet when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs and puts forth large branches so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade." That's Mark chapter 4, verse 30. I'd invite you to pray for the women who come to Abby's House to find a place, to find their branch, if you will, in which to be safe. So where is Abby's House now, and where is it going in the future? And I have to say, this is really an exciting time in the organization's history because we're at a major turning point. I described to the group this morning the condition of the property at 52 High Street, this is the big one that we got from the Sisters of Mercy. It is solid as a rock. It's a brick, beautiful building. Remember, 55 bedrooms or so. That's how large it is. And it had been in existence 100 years with not too much done to it. It was beautifully well maintained, but not in terms of systems. So all these systems needed to be completely replaced. It had no elevator. It does now. We have a woman living there who is in her 80s, who has been there since the sisters owned it. I think she was a teenager when she went to live there. And her bedroom is on the 4th floor. And the laundry has been in the basement, the only laundry. So just having an elevator is a wonderful thing. So we embarked on a $16.5 million renovation, which is, I'm going to say, more than halfway done now. Every time I go to the building, I don't know what to expect. There's, construction in every corner. There's been the addition of the elevator. There's an accessible room on each floor. They still have shared bathrooms, but those have all been completely redone. The Thrift Shop, which is located in the lower level, has been really spruced up, and it looks like a wonderful place to shop and is clean and bright and inviting. There's been new kitchens. Each floor now has its own kitchen. So the women who would have to go down with their can of soup to go heat it on the first floor for their dinner, now they have a kitchen on their own floor next to a communal area. They also, in their rooms now, have a beautiful fan to ventilate. They have a refrigerator, which I don't quite know what size to call it, but it's not one of those little ones, and it's not one of the giant ones. It's a very beautiful, and one woman, I think she was on the website the other day or on the Facebook, and she said, I can't wait to buy ice cream and put it in there. She's going to have her own food and way to cook it. It's just an amazing renovation. It's allowed private spaces for women to meet with counselors or advocates. It's supplied a newly renovated kitchen. It's a big commercial kitchen which stores the food for the food pantry and which meals are prepared. So the feeling around Abby's house now is one of even more hope, and we feel like this renovation to this building has prepared it for the next 100 years. And that building is still going to be standing, we hope, and hopefully we will still be in operation, or the need has gone away, but I'm thinking it maybe won't. It also, the amazing part of this renovation is might think, oh, that took away space. It didn't. We were able to add 2 more rooms. That's 2 more units of affordable housing has been added to an area where there's a serious need of it. So what can your congregation do? You've already done wonders with your gift program, and I spoke with some of the people who were involved in that. One of the beauties of me having retired in this last year is I am no longer in the board meetings at night and kind of running in and out for business type things, and I'm able to be there and meet the women and kind of see what goes on a day-by-day basis. And I can tell you, I've never walked in and witnessed anything but smiles, hugs, and help. But one thing that relates to your gift program, our church did one also, and on some of the lists, I don't know if this was on your list, but on some of the lists were umbrellas. And to us, I don't know, I've got about 5 umbrellas under the seat of my car that I never seem to find. And I went around the corner into someone's office, and there was a woman in there, and she had just received her bag of gifts. And it was just before Christmas. And she went in to thank the staff member. She didn't know I was in the room. And she said, "Oh, I can't thank you enough for that beautiful gift. I got an umbrella. And I had just last week broken my umbrella. And I went to the dollar store, and I just couldn't buy it because it was too cheap. It was going to fall apart, and I couldn't afford the better one. But I got a totes umbrella." And if you think about it, most of these women, very few have a vehicle. They're out, they're walking, and we don't even think about it, but an umbrella is, kind of a necessity in your life. And it just hit me right over the head how important those gift programs are, that each woman gets something that is really helpful to their daily life. So I hope you continue with the gift program and know that it is appreciated and it's a beautiful thing to see. Just the fact, this is their home, but for them to receive a gift, and when it's given to them, it's, I don't know if you did the wrapping, but it's from the Abbey's community because we're all part of the Abbey's community. So donations of any size at any time are, of course, welcome. As I say, this is a donor-funded organization. You can raise funds. There's a little program that we've had for many years, and it's called Buy a Bed. And what it is a breakdown of what does it cost to have a bed for one woman for one night. And a while ago, we came up with $35. I think it's really much more than that, but we're still, for the moment, we're on $35. So you could do a buy a bed, put a poster up with a bed, and if you think about it in those terms, and maybe someone can afford 2 nights, maybe someone can afford a week or a month. If you visualize in those terms, that's a very effective way. You can continue to participate in the holiday program, but also check the website, and I have some materials here which the newsletter has a list of current needs. And I notice, I think you folks have you had a sock drive also or something like that? Just collect socks, just new socks for women. Sheets for twin beds. Each woman who leaves the shelter is given the sheets for her next stop. I was thinking of things for the youth, collecting backpacks, waterproof backpacks, because women who may need to be walking to their destinations, to work or wherever, backpacks are a wonderful thing. But there's always updated lists on the website of things that are very, very helpful. I also noticed that you have a quilting group, and handmade quilts are just glorious, especially in the shelter, but even now some of these women now at 52 are moving into new bedrooms. And when I went to see some of the bedrooms, they all had new sheets and new blankets. And I know that those all came from churches like yours and mine and other groups. And it was just wonderful that they're moving into this freshly painted room and that they can have something new. We also have received many beautiful quilts at the shelter, or that are used at the shelter, and for children, small ones. And I've seen children who haven't had a home and who have their very own quilt, and they take that with them. So that's something that is always a beautiful donation. Donating to the Thrift Shop, and again, on the website are the parameters for what are needed, but particularly women's good, clean, gently used clothing. And that in particular, not children's, there's government regulations about children's clothing and the buttons and the zippers and all that, so we don't accept those. Attend Abby's House events. There's always something going on, and our biggest fundraiser of the year is May 16th. In the evening, it's at Holy Cross College. And there's tasting stations and a silent auction, but more importantly, there'll be short presentations for you to learn more about Abby's, and you could meet people who are involved in this on a day-to-day basis. And every October, there is a 5K. So if you have some runners or walkers and you'd like to go individually or field a team, that is also a wonderful event. And you can, if you have individually or there's a group that wants to do volunteering at Abby's House, there's a sign up on the website, or you can connect to the volunteer coordinator, and the congregation can really think about the idea of deepening your relationship, if that's what you choose to do, and maybe some of your members can go meet with a staff member to explore what is needed. I think starting from the place of asking what is needed, looking at the lists, but if there's a group here that wants to do something and they have ideas, I really encourage you to talk with the staff member there who would coordinate volunteers. I'll give you an example of what our church did. We've supported Abby's, our mission committee, ever since I've been there for 26 years. And the last few years, our mission committee decided they wanted to hone in on a few organizations deeply. And we were focused on feeding ministries. And that so happened. We went to meet with people at Abby's House, and they said, we really need more providers of a hot meal at that women's center. And so our church is doing that once a month, and that's working out so beautifully because those who go to serve get to meet the women, sit down, meet staff members, because the whole community comes. So there's all kinds of opportunities that are there for individuals from your congregation and for groups. And of course, there's also big donation opportunities. Now that we have this new building, there are naming opportunities and so forth, and you could connect with our financial development person about that. And again, I say the Facebook and Twitter and email and the website are great places to just kind of go through and see. There are some handouts here. As I say, there's a newsletter and there's a summary, a little bit of a summary of what I've talked about today. And there is a sign-up sheet if anybody, I know you don't want to be on lists, but there's a way to connect to be on the email lists and the Facebook if you choose to do that. If you want to sign up on this list, that would be great, and maybe Sharon can get it back to Abby's. And I think I'm at the point where I should be stopping, but I just want to tell you one tiny story of a child who came to Abby's house, and she came with her mother, escaping an emergency situation. And what this woman, she's now a woman, remembers is the smell and the taste and the feel of the blueberry muffin that was put in front of her to eat. That woman today is now a very successful person in the financial world. She runs a exercise class which is free for women, and she is now a board member at Abby's house. So I have many other stories, but that's the one I wanted to leave you with. And I thank you. God bless.